J.C.M. Byrne, Wistful Ascending. This book, which I read for SPFBO 8, which is a self-published fantasy competition run by Mark Lawrence, is a lot of fun. It is a superhero space opera that takes place on a space station in a faraway place, but it exists in our world where like Earth exists. I would say that the strongest element of this series is that the world building in Wistful Ascending is excellent. The explanation of where society is and how all of the aliens interact with each other, the way that superheroes exist in this world, and the way that the magic system comes into play. Lots of the little touches in the ways that societies have different cultures and the way that those blend together into this new version of what sentient society looks like. It is really, really cool. And throughout the book, the world building is the strongest portion. For the soul element of this world building, I would say this is probably one of the best built worlds I've read in self-published fantasy. We follow a character with superhero powers who clearly wants to leave his past behind him, and he's now working as essentially the human version of a tow truck. He has superpowers so he can like pull spaceships in with just his like flying around like Superman. This is clearly a dude with a lot of power, and we see him try to lay low in the situation that he is in to try to fit in and make his own little life, and lots of really cool things are happening around him. The tone of Wistful Ascending is one of like a superhero space opera, which is what it is, but it's more of a lighthearted tone, though there are dark and some brutal moments. There's also a ton of humor in the book. I would say the closest tie that I have for the type of humor is Dresden-esque, but it's probably not going to turn as many people off as the Dresden humor might. It's not as strong. And when I say not as strong, I mean it's not as forceful. It's not as constantly smashing you over the face, but also I didn't ever laugh as much as I do in some of the Dresden parts. But the setup that we have in the story is pretty great. It's very easy to be drawn in by the way that the setting is portrayed, and as pieces get doled out over time, it all just sort of clicks together in a way that makes you want to continue reading. And the way this blends in with probably the book's biggest weakness is its pacing, which is not to say that it's a slow-paced book. But a lot of times when you're talking about books pacing, you're trying to describe whether it is a character-focused book or a plot-focused book, and this book is a little bit of neither. It's mostly a character-focused book, focusing on the plights of the main character and the things that are happening to him. He doesn't make a lot of the things happen. They're just lots of different forces acting upon his life, and he has to react to them, and they build out over the course of the book. And each of those elements is pretty interesting on its own, but there are parts of the book where you don't know where the plot's going. Like, you don't always know what the next chapter is actually going to be about, because it feels a little bit like separate chunks of things that are going on, and maybe that was intentional. Like, we're going for a superhero style story, so maybe it's supposed to be like little bit pieces of comic books making up a big comic book arc. But if we're looking for a story that has a super obvious setup and like breadcrumbs that lead the trail along where we're going, I don't know if it really succeeds at that. It's hard to tell if it was aiming for that. The characters that we're introduced to over the course of the book, I love them. I thought they were really fun characters, all with their own motivations and goals of things they were trying to accomplish, and they all make sense in the world, and they're all really cool. It's not like a scenario where things are happening and you don't care about parts of it. I care about, genuinely, all of the parts that happen in this book, but because there are so many things happening, and the things are happening to the main character, and the main character is in a position where he doesn't necessarily have a lot of drive himself. Like, he's a character who's just trying to lay low in a world where lots of things are happening. It's just not always clear where we're going. When we get there, I enjoy it. And there's a lot of really cool things to be had in this book. Lots of really cool action, lots of great characters, a good humorous tone with a lot of depth to it, a lot of really cool sci-fi elements, a lot of cool magic elements because it is like a fantasy sci-fi book. It's solid, but that angle may not be for everyone who's looking for strictly like hard fantasy sword and board type thing. So the main caveats here that I would say would push you away from wanting to read this book would be if you don't like things that are heavily sci-fi influenced, like if you don't want a science fantasy type book, this one may not work for you. And then if you are looking for a super epic plot that sort of draws you along like a lot of traditional fantasy would, you instead just want to have great world building be the drive of what's going on, then I would recommend it. If not, it may be tough. My personal thoughts on it, though, is I had a ton of fun reading it. I greatly enjoyed it. I think this is the type of book that could really click for a lot of people. It really did for me. I want to know more about what's happening in this world. With the reveals that happen towards the end of the story, it's definitely a series I want to continue. With more than one element of the story, there's a subversion of tropes that a little bit took me by surprise, but made me like the characters more. Wistful Ascending is a super fun science fantasy book that has a lot of depth to its world, a ton of fun characters to explore, a lot of interesting moving pieces with enough mystery that makes you want to continue the story even when it's not always clear where it's going. Byrne is an author that I'm definitely going to continue to watch. I'm excited to read the second book in this series, which is already available. And if the parts that I've highlighted sound really cool to you, you'll probably really enjoy it also. Have you heard anything about this book? Let me know in the comments down below. If you're interested in reading it, let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos from me in the future, please hit that subscribe button. If you hit the bell, you'll get notified every time I post a new video. I would love to see a new trend of seeing superhero stories told in the book form rather than just the comic book or movie form. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.
Sleep, no one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep, no one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired.